For a Workers' Chamber, Part 3. Parliament is not working for the working class and needs to be reformed to become more representative of their interests. Alternative working class political assemblies. Excluded from Parliament, the working class and labour organisations have a history of setting up alternative assemblies to represent their political interests. The Chartists in their campaign to get working men the vote formed their own Convention of the Industrious Classes, which was to meet on 4th February 1839. This was conceived as running in parallel to the official Parliament in Westminster. The Chartist organisations sent their duly elected delegates to the convention, some of whom believed that theirs was a true parliament, a superior alternative government. Many of the delegates put MC after their names in imitation of MPs. A similar idea was advanced in 1834 with the agitation surrounding the formation of Robert Owen's Grand National Trade Union. This was a pioneering syndicalist organisation which aimed to unite the existing trade unions into one gigantic trade union. This would overthrow the existing exploitative capitalist order through a general strike. In answer to the Chartists demanding that they concentrate on acquiring the vote for working men, the supporters of the GNTU replied that once the union was in power, Parliament would become obsolete. The unions, labour boards and industrial federations would take over the functions of production and consumption instead of private industry. The transferal of private property to common ownership would render political institutions unnecessary. As a result, the House of Commons would become a House of Trades, where the unions would debate economic problems and the management of their industries. The radical working class paper, The Crisis, declared in 1834 that there are two parliaments in London, and we have no hesitation in saying that the Trades Parliament is by far the most important and will, in the course of a year or two, be the more influential. On April the 12th, 1834, the paper wrote, "A struggle is awaiting us, but it is a struggle in which we are sure to conquer. At present we are within the laws, and still we are making our rulers tremble. By and by they will make new laws, and then reproach us for breaking them. Shall we consider it our duty tamely to submit to any new laws which may be made to check our progress to prosperity and social happiness? Let them make laws for themselves if they are so fond of legislating. If they are so fond of imposing taxes, let them tax one another. But let them first ask our consent before they prescribe pills for our disease, which we ourselves know much better how to cure. No! The immediate consequences of any attempt to crush the efforts of the popular mind at this present juncture will be a most resolute determination on the part of the people to legislate for themselves. This will be the result. We shall have a real House of Commons. We have never yet had a House of Commons. The only House of Commons is a House of Trades, and that is only just beginning to be formed. We shall have a new set of boroughs when the unions are organised. Every trade shall be a borough, and every trade shall have a council of representatives to conduct its affairs. Our present commoners know nothing of the interests of the people and care not for them. They are all landholders. How can an employer represent a workman? There are 133,000 shoemakers in the country, yet not one representative have they in the House of Commons. According to the proportion they bear to the population, they ought to have 25 representatives. The same is with carpenters and other trades in proportion. Such a House of Commons is, however, growing. The elements are gathering. The character of the reformed Parliament is now blasted, and like the character of a woman when lost, is not easily recovered. It would be substituted by a House of Trades. The most famous of all the working class alternative forms of government is the Russian Soviets. These were the workers', soldiers and peasant councils which were set up during the revolutions of 1905 and 1917, and which provided the basic popular assemblies that were taken over by the Bolsheviks and transformed into their own instruments of power. Listing their advantage in his 1918 pamphlet, "Can the Bolsheviks Retain State Power?" Lenin wrote, "This apparatus, by virtue of the fact that its personnel is elected and subject to recall at the people's will without any bureaucratic formalities, is far more democratic than any previous apparatus. It provides an organizational form for the vanguard, i.e. for the most class-conscious, most energetic and most progressive section of the oppressed classes, the workers and peasants, and so constitutes an apparatus by means of which the vanguard of the oppressed classes can elevate, train, educate and lead the entire vast mass of these classes, which has up to now stood completely outside of political life and history. It makes it possible to combine the advantages of the parliamentary system with those of immediate and direct democracy, i.e. to vest in the people's elective representatives both legislative and executive functions. Compared with the bourgeois parliamentary system, this is an advance in democracy's development which is of worldwide historic importance. Similar councils were set up in Germany and Austria during the Council Revolution of 1918 to 19, following these countries' defeat in the First World War. Their existence split the German Social Democratic Party. The majority Social Democrats, SPD, wished to suppress them, while the Independent Social Democrats, USP, who broke away, supported their inclusion as a constitutional organ of government. In November 1918, the USPD proclaimed, "The class-conscious proletariat has recognized that its struggle for liberation can only be carried out by its own forces. The existing organizations are not enough. A new proletarian fighting organization is needed." In the council system, the proletarian revolution has created this fighting organization. It welds together the working masses in the factories for revolutionary action. It gives to the proletariat the right to self-government in the factories, in the communes and in the state. It carries out the transformation of the capitalist system into a socialist one. The council system develops in all capitalist countries out of the same economic conditions and becomes the carrier of the proletarian world revolution. The independent social democratic parties takes its stand on the basis of the council system. It supports the councils in their struggle for economic and political power. It fights for the dictatorship of the proletariat, the representative of the great majority of the people, as a necessary precondition for the attainment of socialism. Only socialism brings the elimination of class rule, the elimination of any dictatorship, true democracy. After the collapse in Britain of the Grand National Trade Union, it was several decades before a similar movement, anarcho-syndicalism, appeared. This was in France in the 1890s. From the middle of the 1880s, anarchists began to enter the French trade unions following the passage of the 1884 Act, allowing the formation of trade unions to fight for the workers' economic interests. The anarchists became particularly influential in the Bourses de Travail, labour exchanges that were founded by the unions to compete with the Bureau de Placement, which operated in the employer's favour. In 1895, the General Secretary of the Fédération des Bourses de Travail was the anarchist Ferdinand Pelusier. Pelusier was a journalist who had started out as a radical before joining the Guidist Socialist Party. He became disillusioned with political parties and so turned to advocating direct action and the general strike as the best method for advancing the workers' interests and in preparing for the coming social revolution. The anarchists also began to enter the rival trade union organization, the Fédération Nationale des Syndicats. Together with the Blanquists and the Revolutionary Socialists led by Jean Alleman, they took over control of the federation from the Guidists. At a joint congress in Nantes in 1894, the vast majority of the delegates passed a resolution declaring that the ultimate revolutionary means is the general strike. The two organizations set up a joint committee to convey this message to the workers. In 1895, the Fédération Nationale des Syndicats became the Confédération Générale du Travail. Several years later, relations between the CGT and the Fédération des Bourses de Travail were sufficiently close for the two to merge at the Congress of Montpellier in 1902. The CGT was never a solely anarcho-syndicalist organization. A large minority, perhaps as many as about half the members, were reformist socialists, while the revolutionary wing of the party was composed of Blanquists, Allemanists, and pure syndicalists like Pierre Monat. These considered that trade unions formed the only method of revolutionary activity. The CGT's Secretary General was Victor Griffuls, a former Blanquist, but the section for the Bourses de Travail was led by the anarchists G. Yvetot and P. de la Salle, while another anarchist, E. Pouget, was in charge of the section for National Federation, and edited the newspaper La Voix du Peuple. From France, syndicalist ideas spread to the rest of Europe. Belgium, Germany, Italy, Bohemia, now the Czech Republic, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland and Switzerland. They also expanded into Spain, where they famously became influential for a brief period during the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, when anarchists and anarcho-syndicalists took over the effective government of Catalonia. They also crossed the Channel to England. In 1910, Tom Mann and Guy Bowman set up the Syndicalist Education League, which became particularly influential in the transport and mining unions. Rudolf Rocker, the great German anarcho-syndicalist activist and revolutionary, gave the following definition of the aims and purposes of this form of revolutionary trade unionism. He stated that, according to the syndicalist view, the trade unions, the syndicate, is the unified organisation of labour, and has for its purpose the defence of the interests of the producers within existing society and the preparing for and the practical carrying out of the reconstruction of social life after the pattern of socialism. It has therefore a double purpose. One, as the fighting organisation of the workers against the employers to enforce the demands of the workers for the safeguarding and raising of the standard of living. Two, as the school for the intellectual training of the workers to make them acquainted with the technical management of production and economic life in general, so that when a revolutionary situation arises, they will be capable of taking the socio-economic organism into their own hands and remaking it according to socialist principles. He further states the anarcho-syndicalist case against political parties. Anarcho-syndicalists are of the opinion that political parties, even when they bear a socialist name, are not fitted to perform either of these two tasks. He goes on to describe how the revolutionary trade unions would form the basis for the new socialist order after the revolution. Anarcho-syndicalists are convinced that a socialist economic order cannot be created by the decrees and statutes of a government, but only by the solidaric collaboration of the workers with hand or brain in each special branch of production. That is, through the taking over of the management of all plants by the producers themselves, under such form that the separate groups, plants and branches of industry are independent members of the general economic organisation and systematically carry on production and the distribution of the products in the interests of the community on the basis of free mutual agreements. In such a case, the labour cartels would take over the existing social capital in each community, determine the needs of the inhabitants of their districts, and organise local consumption. Through the agency of the National Federation of Labour Cartels, it will be possible to calculate the total requirements of the country and adjust the work of production accordingly. On the other hand, it will be the task of the industrial alliances to take control of all the instruments of production, machines, raw materials, means of transportation and the like, and to provide the separate producing groups with what the producers themselves need. In a word, 1. Organisation of the plants by the producers themselves and direction of the work by labour councils elected by them. 2. Organisation of the total production of the country by the industrial and agricultural alliances. 3. Organisation of consumption by the labour cartels. Guild socialism in Britain. In Britain, syndicalist ideas were first spread by the Socialist Labour Party in Scotland. This had originally been part of Heineman's Social Democratic Federation, but had been influenced by the Socialist Labour Party in the US and had finally split off. The leader of the American Socialist Labour Party was Daniel de Leon, a university lecturer and Marxist, who had become disenchanted by the corruption of socialist parties and labour leaders by parliamentary politics, and so turned to revolutionary trade unionism. The same attitudes also led to the formation of the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW or Wobblies. This was a radical trade union movement which also rejected parliamentary politics in favour of direct action and which aimed for the ownership and control of industry by the workers themselves. The Plebs League at Oxford University was partly the result of these new influences. It was founded at Ruskin College as a section of the IWW. British syndicalism was also influenced by contemporary French movements in the Confédération Nationale du Travail. These influenced the revolutionary labour leader, Tom Mann. After emigrating to Australia to become involved in the labour movement there, he returned to Europe, where, Greatly impressed by French syndicalism, he travelled again to Paris in 1910. Returning to Britain with the aid of the socialist journalist Guy Bowman between 1910 and 11, Mann edited a series of booklets entitled The Industrial Syndicalist. A syndicalist conference was held in Manchester on 26th of November 1910, which was attended by 200 delegates, representing 60,000 workers. This led to the foundation of the Industrial Syndicalist Education League. A monthly paper, The Syndicalist, was also launched, lasting from 1912 to 1914. Guild socialism was put forward by the writers Arthur J. Penty, S. J. Hobson, and D. D. H. Cole in the magazine New Age, founded by members of the Fabian Society in 1907 and edited by A. R. Orridge. The real founder of Guild socialism was Penty, a medieval historian and Christian social writer. But it was Hobson and Cole who adapted the idea to modern social conditions. Like syndicalism, Guild socialism advocated the control of industry by the workers within it. However, it also believed in forming administrative organs to protect the consumer, as also recommended by the cooperative movement and state socialism. Under Guild socialism, industry will be operated by the workers in each sector of the economy through the guilds. These were vastly expanded trade unions which would include all the workers and officials in a particular industry, from the manual labourers to the administrators, scientists and technicians. Hobson, in his 1908 book, Guild Principles in War and Peace, believed that the struggle between capital and labour would eventually result in the victory of the workers. The capitalists would then surrender the means of the production to the state in return for an annuity for 2 or 3 generations. The state would then lease these industries to the guild, which would be about 15 in number. The guilds would unite in a federation whose general committee, elected the guild's annual congress, would govern them and administer overall production. The 19th century socialist, John Francis Bray, also recommended the cooperative administration of industry by the workers in his Labour's Wrongs and Labour's Remedy of 1839. He believed that the workers should possess the means of production and administer industry through the creation of companies resembling vast joint stock companies, but which were owned and operated by the workers. Each company would run a particular industry with credit supplied by a national bank. Cole, on the other hand, did not know how many guilds there would be, and considered that there would also be democratically administered factories outside the administration of particular guilds, but adhering to their standards, as well as other competing guilds in particular industries. Right, and that's enough for the time being. Thank you for listening.